Once upon a time in the busy city of Bellwood, there lived a man named David. He wasn't flashy or loud, but everyone who knew him said the same thing. David was dependable. He worked a steady job, kept his apartment neat, and lived a simple, quiet life. But David's life wasn't always so calm. Years ago, he had been married to a woman he loved dearly. Her sudden death left him heartbroken and lonely. Since then, he focused on his routines, avoiding anything that might shake up his world. But life has a way of surprising us. One day, while at a friend's dinner party, David met Sarah. She was young, full of energy, and seemed to bring a spark wherever she went. Sarah laughed loudly, talked with her hands, and had a way of making everyone feel like the most important person in the room. David, who usually blended into the background, found himself drawn to her. Over the next few weeks, they started spending more time together. Sarah brought a kind of excitement David hadn't felt in years. She introduced him to new music, dragged him out to events he'd never consider, and teased him gently when he was too serious. "David, you're like an old oak tree," she'd say, laughing. "Strong and steady, but you need some sunlight." David didn't mind her teasing. He was falling in love. It didn't matter to him that Sarah was half his age, or that they had very different interests. He believed her youthful energy could fill the emptiness in his life. Sarah, for her part, said she admired David's maturity and the calmness he brought to her whirlwind world. After a few months of dating, Sarah moved into David's small but comfortable apartment. She brought bright pillows, loud music, and an energy that made the space feel alive. For a while, everything seemed perfect. David adjusted his routine to make her happy, and Sarah seemed to settle into the new life they were building together. But it wasn't long before their differences started to show. Sarah loved going out bars, concerts, and late-night dinners. She was always looking for the next adventure. David, on the other hand, preferred quiet nights at home with a good book or a simple movie. He tried to keep up with her at first, but it was exhausting. One evening after Sarah came home late from a night out with friends, they had their first real argument. David asked, "Do you always need to be out? Can't we just enjoy being together at home sometimes?" Sarah rolled her eyes. "David, I'm not like you. I need excitement. I need to feel alive. You're sweet, but sometimes it feels like you're holding me back." Her words stung more than David wanted to admit, but he didn't push the issue. He told himself they'd find a way to make it work. After all, relationships were about compromise, weren't they? What David didn't realize was that Sarah's restlessness wasn't something he could fix with compromise. It was a part of her. And as the days went by, Sarah started finding her excitement elsewhere. Everything changed the day a young man named Alex appeared in their lives. At first, Sarah said he was just someone she'd hired to do their laundry. "He's great," she said casually. "He picks up the clothes and drops them off all fresh and folded. You'll love him." David nodded, grateful for the help. But as time went on, he noticed Alex started coming around more often than seemed necessary. "Why does the laundry guy need to be here so much?" David asked one evening. Sarah waved him off with a laugh. "Oh, David, stop being so serious. He's just doing his job." But something didn't sit right with David. He started to wonder if Sarah was keeping secrets, but he pushed the thought aside, hoping he was wrong. It was a Thursday afternoon when David came home earlier than usual. He had taken the rest of the day off to catch up on some much-needed rest, but as he approached the apartment building, a strange feeling washed over him. Something didn't feel right. He brushed it off, telling himself it was just the stress of the week. As he climbed the stairs to their apartment, he noticed a familiar scent lingering in the hallway. A bold, sharp cologne that wasn't his. His mind raced. Could it be Alex? Sarah had mentioned the laundry guy could be picking up clothes that day, but why would he still be around? Quietly, David unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was oddly silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy. He set his bag down and glanced around. The living room was spotless. The brightly colored pillows Sarah loved were perfectly arranged, and the faint sound of muffled voices drifted from the bedroom. David's heart pounded as he walked toward the door. He didn't want to believe what his gut was telling him, but each step made the truth harder to deny. As he reached the bedroom, he heard Sarah's voice followed by laughter, soft, playful, and far too familiar. He pushed the door open, and there they were. Sarah froze mid-laugh, her face draining of color. Alex, who had been sitting too close to her on the edge of the bed, jumped to his feet. They both started talking at once, their words tumbling over each other in a rush of excuses. "David, it's not what it looks like," Sarah stammered. "I was just, we were talking about Alex," began. David raised a hand to silence them. He didn't shout, didn't scream. Instead, his voice was calm, but each word cut through the room like a knife. "Not what it looks like." "Then what is it, Sarah? Explain this to me." Sarah opened her mouth but said nothing. Alex looked down at the floor, avoiding David's gaze. The room felt like it was spinning. David's chest tightened as he fought to stay composed. "I trusted you," David said, his voice breaking. "I gave you everything I had left. And this is how you repay me." Sarah finally found her voice. "David, I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely and you don't understand me." "Don't understand you," David repeated, his tone bitter. "I've done nothing but try to understand you, Sarah. I changed my entire life for you." Alex mumbled an apology and tried to leave, but David stepped aside, motioning for him to go. "Get out," he said coldly. "And don't come back." Alex bolted from the room, leaving Sarah and David alone. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air between them. Sarah reached out to touch David's arm, but he pulled away. "David, Save it," he interrupted. "There's nothing you can say to fix this." That night, Sarah packed her things while David sat in the living room staring blankly at the wall. He didn't stop her. He didn't even look at her as she walked out the door. When it closed behind her, the silence felt louder than anything he'd ever heard. The days that followed were a blur for David. He went to work, came home, and repeated the cycle. The apartment felt emptier than ever, but this time, it wasn't the quiet he craved. It was the kind of silence that reminded him of all he had lost. His neighbours, who had once whispered about the age gap between David and Sarah, now gossiped about her sudden departure. David heard their murmurs as he passed them in the hall, but he didn't care. He had bigger things to worry about. One evening, as he sat by the window, a knock came at the door. It was Clara, his niece, who had always been like a daughter to him. She brought over dinner and insisted on staying for a while. "Uncle David," she said gently, "you can't let this eat you up. It's not your fault." David shook his head. "Maybe it is. Maybe I was fooling myself thinking I could keep up with someone like her." "No," Clara said firmly. "He gave her love and respect. What she did was her choice, not your failure." Her words stayed with David long after she left. He realized she was right. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could decide how to move forward. Slowly, he began to rebuild his life. Months later, David found himself smiling again. He started going out more, not to the wild places Sarah had dragged him to, but to calm and welcoming spots where he could meet people who shared his interests. He joined a book club, took up gardening, and reconnected with old friends. As for Sarah, she became a cautionary tale among their neighbours, a reminder that chasing excitement without care for others often leads to regret. Alex disappeared from the picture not long after their affair was exposed. David, however, chose not to dwell on the past. He learned to treasure his peace and vowed never to lose himself in trying to keep someone else happy. And so the moral lesson of this story is that true love is built on trust and mutual respect, not fleeting excitement. David's story reminds us that while betrayal can break your heart, it can also teach you to protect it. Thanks for watching, and until next story, keep smiling.